Hello, I am Rabbi Howard Goldsmith, and I am joined today by my friend and colleague, Rabbi Ira Eben. We are continuing a conversation this week in our series, Sacred Text Left to Right. And the conversation is about immortality and life after death, and what Judaism has to say about it, and hopefully more interestingly, how Ira and I agree and where we disagree. Last week, we left off with a discussion about judgment and the role that life after death may play in rewarding righteous people and punishing wicked people. And we continue this week with an exploration of what that life after death may look like, if we can use the word look for something like this. So Ira, I'm going to pass it off to you first for a look back at some of our classical texts.
Thanks, Howie. So in particular, I want to continue on that theme of what life after death, according to our sources, would look like. Obviously, for the wicked versus the righteous, based on the idea of judgment, it'll depend. And so here with the Tractate Tanit 31a, it's actually the last piece of the Talmud in Tractate Tanit, in the Babylonian Talmud. It has great source to discuss what do the truly righteous do in the world to come. And I'll read it. You can see it right down there, maybe, on Tractate 31a, Tanit 31a. The tractate concludes with a statement related to the topic of dancing. Amar Ula Ulas, the city of Beer, said that Rabbi Elazar said the following: in the future, in the end of days, the Holy One, blessed be He, will arrange a dance of the righteous, and He will be sitting among them in the Garden of Eden. And each and every one of the righteous will point to God with his finger, as is stated, and it shall be said on that day, behold, this is the God from whom we waited, that He may save. This is the Lord whom we wait, we will be glad and rejoice in His salvation, which is a quote from Isaiah chapter 25. And so in this description of what the truly righteous do, they're basically dancing around in the Garden of Eden in heaven, that was synonymous with heaven, and they're pointing to God in the center. And so my image and my understanding of the world to come based on the source is that I kind of see it as a sort of a stadium. When you go to a stadium, go to a baseball game or whatever, you have seats and you have the expensive seats, right? So people get in, you get the cheap seats, you get to be part of the show, you get to see the game, but you're sitting all the way up with pigeons up there on the top in the cheap seats. And that is those who got in. Those who got in, those who had admission, but they got stuck in the cheap seats. As you get, based on your judgment of where your evaluation when you come to the next world, as you get a better seat. So you have the mezzanine, you have the box seats, and then ultimately you have field seats, right, which are extremely expensive. What is the center of the stadium? That's God. And the closest you are to God, the more righteous you are, the closer you are to God in the world to come. And that's the image that the tractate describes, the Tanit describes, of what the world to come sort of looks like. Howie?
I agree with your interpretation of the text, and that's what it says. And I struggle mightily with that notion in reality.
You don't like baseball?
No, the metaphor you used was perfect. But trying to understand that as reward and punishment in the world to come for the actions that we take on earth is a place where I have trouble going. For me, immortality doesn't look anything like this world. And I think it's very much impossible for us to even imagine what it might be. I tend towards more naturalistic explanations of immortality. So for one, and probably the most classical text that I use in thinking about this is Maimonides, who really danced around this issue. I mean, as a philosopher and a rabbi, as somebody very much of his modern world.
And a rationalist. Maimonides was a rationalist.
Yes, a real rationalist. He kind of had to do a dance between traditional Jewish beliefs and the philosophy and science of his day. He understood immortality to really be through knowledge, that the more that we know, the more immortal we become, because even when we die, the knowledge that we've incorporated as part of ourselves continues to be true. Once you learn that 2 + 2 = 4, that's true even when you die. And so as 2 + 2 = 4 becomes a part of you, that lasts after you die. Maimonides talks about it in terms of life after death with knowledge of God. and that when we die, we gain a knowledge of God that we did not have before. So that's one of the classical sources that I connect most closely to. It's not a warm and fuzzy notion of immortality and doesn't necessarily provide a lot of comfort. That said, there's a lot of naturalistic ways that we attain immortality. Biologically, if we're blessed with children, through the survival of our memory, through the influence that we've had in the world, there are real legacies that we leave that really they identify those timeless things of the spirit, as Rabbi Milton Steinberg really said. The other really powerful way that I imagine immortality is through my connection with the Jewish people.
Howie, can I jump on this one first?
Yeah, jump away.
Jumping. So, when you're describing Maimonides, I happen to have the text here. It's chapter 8, verse 2, chapter 8, halacha 2, 3, and 4 in the Mishnah Torah and the Hilchot Teshuvah, the laws of repentance, which you can see right over here. So, what Maimonides is describing knowledge is not just 2 and 2 equals 4. The understanding God created when God created the concept of 2 and 2 and that knowledge knowledge only means by definition understanding the creator. And so what we're you don't disagree that in the existing next world is, as the Gemara in Tanit explains, is that you're as close to God as possible because you gain that knowledge of understanding who God is, and therefore you can be close to him, whatever that means. The truly righteous are those who have become close to him through action, through deed, through philosophy and thought. Ultimately, relationship is with him. Ultimately, now, because of their clear knowledge of him, can be as close to him in the world to come. So,
I don't read anything about relationship in this text. I'm happy to throw relationship in there. I think that in a supernatural way, I want to believe that, I believe firmly actually in a relationship with God. And I do believe that in that relationship, I will attain some kind of immortality. But I don't think Maimonides is talking about relationship with God. I think Maimonides is talking about knowledge in an Aristotelian sort of way, in a Platonic sort of way, about understanding forms and the ideal forms of things that we see emanations from.
So I think that's where we disagree, and I think that's the Kunz. I think Maimonides, when he specifically talks about knowledge, it's all specifically about knowledge of the workings of God, the actions of God, the ways of God, his ways of pleasantries, as well as not, and that includes all of science and all of philosophy and everything that goes with it. And so ultimately, in the next world, when there is nothing physical, the only thing you have is that relationship of that knowledge based on the knowledge that you've acquired.
So you think that it's through that knowledge that you form a relationship with God. And I question if that's a two-way relationship in a Maimonidean understanding of this question.
Well, if we want to get Maimonidean, so
I'm not sure we do. Actually, I'm not sure we want to go down this road because it's a
go much further, and there's much more based on the Rambam's Hilchot Mitzvot, where the first that he gives is Leida al Hashem, to know God, and that is his first commandment to all of that he enumerates in the 613. But I think we tackled this. Let's go to the next piece because I think we can go on forever on this.
I think we can go further on that too. I'm just going to say one more thing about Maimonides. My understanding of Maimonides does not mean what's my understanding of a relationship with God. I think that we're much more apt to be able to form a relationship with God than we are to be able to understand God's ways and methods. I think trying to understand about how God created the world and the way God interacts in the world, that's next to impossible. But I think that forming a relationship with God is one of the very first things that we can do as spiritual beings. And one of the first entrees into a notion of immortality. So in that sense, we agree. We have a different understanding of Maimonides, but we share a sense of the primacy of that relationship with God. Okay. So
it's so much more here.
We should talk about this every week.
Because there's so much more. Even just to study Maimonides and understand what he's referring to in the 10th chapter is, when he talks about knowing God and desiring to get close to him. In the second chapter of Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah, he's going to know God, and then Sama Nafshi L'Kalchai, the more knowledge you have of God, my soul thirsts for the living God. The knowledge and relationship are intertwined in Maimonides, but there's a lot here.
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
I guess I want to step back to immortality with two quick notions, and then you'll get the final word because we're already over our 10-minute mark.
Ah.
One is this notion of immortality through peoplehood, that as part of the Jewish people, I understand my story and my history going way back before I was born, and therefore I understand it as extending beyond the limits of my lifetime. And that is a true feeling. It was beautifully expressed by a rabbi named Rabbi Raskus, and that will be quoted down below as well. And then finally, there's a combination of physics and mystery that I really hold on to most tightly. And the notion in physics is that nothing can ultimately be created or destroyed. Therefore, if I exist in any meaningful way, then I can't be destroyed in any meaningful way either. I will transform and I will change. And I don't know, obviously, I can't know what is beyond that ultimate transition. But if what we know from religion and from science says that the soul cannot ultimately be destroyed, I'm comfortable knowing that much and surrendering to the mystery of what that might be.
Okay. So, Howie, I want to jump in on the second point you made, which they were all very good points. The point of immortality, and specifically, like you said, Rabbi Raskus discussed the immortality through peoplehood. I actually want to contrast between the two, which is the immortality of the Jewish people versus the immortality of individuals. Yes, through my connection to the Jewish people, I become immortal, right? But that's not necessarily my individual immortality. And I'll explain, Rabbi Soloveitchik explained so beautifully and powerfully in regards to the immortality of the Jewish people. He said that we see as time is linear, right? Things happen as they progress. And Rabbi Soloveitchik explained so beautifully. He said that for the Jewish people, time is not linear in any way, shape, or form. Because God looks at the world, was, is, and be. He looks at the world and sees everything, past, future, and present. And so the Jewish people are the same way, past, future, and present. They're all the same. When we go back, when we celebrate the Exodus on Passover, and we're supposed to see ourselves, we've been taken out. That's because we were taken out, because time is not linear. Time is one big group. There's an immortality of the Jewish people. When we celebrate Ma'amad Har Sinai, standing in front of Mount Sinai, it's because, according to our traditions, we were there. We felt like we were there, just like Rabbi Raskus writes so beautifully that we were present, and because we're all part of that, the Jewish people is not linear. Time is not linear for the people. However, for individuals, that might connect us to this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have our own particular, specific world to come. And I think that's really where we differ. I think every individual has their own version of their own particular world to come. The heaven and the next world is actually specific to me, next person. Each one has.
Well, I hope that next week we get to talk a little bit more about this, because I want to hear what you have to say. That means like you maintain your own identity as you cross over into this new world. But I think we're gonna have to leave it there for now.
We're gonna have to cross over later on when that passes.
Well, neither of us should get these theories confirmed for a long time. Yeah. I've made this dream. Okay. Thanks a lot, Ira.
Thanks, Howie.